Hello there, welcome back to Jennie Designs with Paper. Thanks for stopping by my channel today. I'm working in my art journal, so get comfy and let's get crafty. So this year over at the Mission Inspiration group, Mike has changed up how he's doing the Mission Inspiration prompts, and he's doing a one-word prompt a week. And I am taking all of the weeks of the month and making one art journal page. The first one for February was minimalism. The second was fractured. The third was security, and the fourth was flight. So I'm going to take all four of these words and turn them into one art journal page. So I have cropped the images down and put them on one little printed out picture, and I'm going to start with the first one, which is minimalization, whatever that word is. I'm not saying properly. I have a piece of mixed media paper. It's about 5.5 by 8.5 inches. And I'm going to cover it with a piece of that Tim Holtz tissue paper. I don't remember which one this is. I am going to glue it down with some matte liquid medium and a paintbrush. I'm just putting a little bit on the page itself. And I'm going to spread it around, especially at the edges and corners, to make sure that the tissue paper sticks down. Once I have enough of the page covered, I'm going to go ahead and lay this tissue paper down over the top of my mixed media paper and just cover it with a coat of that matte medium as well. It will come up through the bottom a little bit, so I didn't have to put a ton across the top. And again, I'm making sure I get the edges nice and covered so that it doesn't peel up on the edges, which is going to be important today, probably maybe more than average. I'm going to go ahead and heat set that with my heat tool. I want to make sure it is completely dry. Well, I got to make sure it's dry because the next step is gesso, right? The first thing I want to do, though, before the gesso is get the edges cleaned up. And I tried to see if I could tear it, but it's kind of a wax-coated tissue paper. It's not like a wrapping tissue, so it doesn't tear quite as easily as maybe a wrapping tissue or a napkin would. So I did pull out my long Tim Holtz shears. I'm going to go ahead and trim off all of the edges of this page. You can see that my page already has the holes punched in it. That's not even going to matter in the end because I'm going to cover it up. So I have a pot of thick gesso here. It is kind of separated. The pot is almost gone. I'm going to stir it up with a palette knife real quick and put a little blob of that on my work surface here. And then I'm going to add a layer or two to this art journal page. Now I am using a very wet brush. It has a lot of water in it. And I'm going to put one layer down first. I'm mostly putting it down in one direction. But then I changed directions because I realized it's not going to matter. When it matters, you kind of want the brush strokes to go one way, but it doesn't matter today. I'm going to go ahead and heat set that. I want to see how much of that tissue paper image is coming through because the first word for the month is minimalist or minimalism. There we go, minimalism. I decided I wanted it a little bit more pushed back, so I'm adding a little bit more of that gesso to the page, especially some of the darker outline areas. I'm going to go ahead and heat set that again. And then we're going to work on some color. So for a minimalist art piece, you're going to have a palette that is neutrals and one color or one color family in my brain. Now, everybody's idea of minimalism is going to be different, but in my brain, I wanted this to be kind of a light to dark, left to right flowing piece. So I'm adding some brown, this is potting soil archival ink, to the left side of my page. And as I get down the page, I'm coming in a little bit farther. I think I need to get a re-inker for this ink pad because it is really dry and it is hard to get the ink off the sponge onto my page. So I need to look into a re-inker. But anyway, I'm just trying to get that shadow edge a little bit not straight. So to add my color, I've chosen all of the greens in my set of Derwent Inktense pencils. The first one I grabbed was kind of a turquoise, and I didn't really love the color, so I added a ton of water to it. really pushed that color out, and then picked up a different color green, which is more like what I was going for. And I am still struggling with the pigment to water ratio. I need a wet brush to move the pigment, but I'm getting too much water on it, and that's because I have a really good brush. It really holds a lot of water. But my first plan is to put a vertical line down the second half of that page, kind of like 2/3 of the page over, and I'm just going to continue to add pigment until it's dark enough, and then I'm going to add a line of ink across the bottom in a horizontal plane, kind of creating a meeting point. I have this homemade stencil. I took all of the circle punches that I own, and I punched holes in this piece of chipboard. And I'm going to use this to create some circles on my page along these lines. So the first thing I'm doing is adding 3 circles to, I thought I did them all at the same time. I'm adding 3 circles, and then I'm going back and adding a second circle to each of the 3, what will be 3 groups of circles. And so I will have 3 groups of 3 circles, which means I have an odd number of groups, and each group has an odd number of circles. So it works for my brain. It works for my brain. My plan was to then take a smaller paintbrush and a different pot of water that maybe I couldn't get so much on my page. And these are 3 different colors of green, by the way, the same as the line, and then 2 other colors. One that's a little bit more true green and one that's a little more olive green. You can't tell that there's different colors here because I did not dry each circle before I started the next one. Inktense pencils are waterproof. They're permanent ink if you, or after you, activate all of the pigment with water and then it's dry. So my problem was I was getting a blend instead of a layer because I wasn't drying in between adding the water. So I heat set that down because all of a sudden I was like, oh yeah. And then I decided to emphasize the circles with, this is a Zig pen. It's kind of I think it's like a 0.1 nib. So it's kind of, I think it's the biggest nib in the pack that I have, but it was the only one that was working really good on this gessoed surface. The thinner ones, and I like the thickness of the circle, so it's okay. And then I'm going to go back and add ink to the circles again, and use my paintbrush, add some more water. I am going to try to remember to each time to heat set in between. And here I'm like putting the pigment down. I'm like, oh wait, heat set, heat set, heat set. So I did remember to heat set each circle before I went on to the next. Anytime I did not have all of that pigment completely activated and dried, it did still kind of pick up and blend, but that's okay. It's fine. It still creates that minimalist type of art because I have neutrals and one color. I've got this art that's created with one color. So I didn't really love the black outline with the browns and stuff that were going on. So I got my Faber-Castell, the skinny barrel Pitt pens, and I pulled my stencil back out, and I pulled out that brown Pitt pen, and I went over them again, and I liked the brown outline a little bit better. The Pitt pens are India ink, and they are also permanent. If you are using them on a non-porous surface, for just a second when they are wet, you can kind of blend and smear them out a little bit. It's not why I use them. I use them because they were permanent, and I wanted to kind of cover up that black outline with a brown outline. I didn't really care for the black. So I got done with the circles. I like how they look. I wanted to add a little bit more something to the lines. So I grabbed my micron pen again and a ruler because I can't draw a straight line with a ruler half the time, y'all. So I was not about to freehand this. Like I started to, you saw me, I started to, and then I noped out of that real fast. I just wanted a baseline, kind of. Here is where my art started, and kind of like the beginning point, the baseline kind of thing. So this is my minimalist art, and the next word for the month was fractured. So I'm going to cut this up. I am going to take this background that I just created. And I am going to cut it into fractured pieces of paper. And that was slightly traumatic, I will not lie. Even though I knew going into my project that I was going to do this, that I was going to create this minimalist background, and then I was going to cut it up, I was really enjoying where this page was going. So cutting it up was a little bit hard. That being said, it worked out just like I hoped it would. Like, I had this picture in my mind, and it didn't turn out exactly because I didn't have a finished piece, like a finished background to start with, but it worked out like I wanted. So the next part of my fractured step is to add some of that archival ink to each edge of my fractured pieces of background. This is just to emphasize that fractured idea. And you see I have half of a sheet of lightweight cardstock right there. It's actually heavyweight copy paper is what it is. When I put this back down, they're not going to touch because the page that I started with was slightly smaller than the page I wanted to end up. Like, I wanted to end up with a page that was half of a sheet of cardstock. So was that like 5.5 by 8.5 by 11? So 5.5 by 8.25. That's kind of where I wanted it to end. So while I am ink blending this, I'm realizing that when I put it back down, you're going to see the white through that background. And that white is going to kind of detract from the idea of minimalism here. And then I had to remember where all these pieces went. So after I got them all, like while I'm putting them here back on my page, so I know where they all went, because I didn't number them. I knew I could put them back together because of how they were decorated or arted or colored on or whatever. And this one was a minute because it has literally nothing on it. I knew I would be able to get them back together, but I didn't like that white showing through. So while I was doing that, I thought of how I could eliminate that white. And the idea that came to me was green pattern paper. So I pulled out the drawer in my craft room that has all of my green pattern papers. And I found this one that has like, it kind of looks like linen, but it's paper. So it has some shadowing kind of sort of in the paper, but anyway. And I'm going around the edge with that green archival ink because I don't want the white edge to show. And then I'm going to back it with that white piece of copy paper because I don't want the back of this pattern paper to show. So I'm going to go ahead and pull out my Yoo-Hoo glue stick. That's called a glue stick. In case your mind forgets words, that's called a glue stick. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I am putting glue stick all over the back of this page. I'm going to go ahead and put this down on my piece of copy paper. This is like a 32-pound copy paper, so it's thicker than most, but it still goes through the printer. And I'm just going to go ahead and lay this down. I am going to hold it in place. I'm going to rub the front, rub the back. I did need to trim it off and then put the green archival ink back around it because some of that white peeked out. And then I'm going to start putting these fractured pieces down. I was going to use the glue stick again, but it does dry faster than I thought I would be able to work with. So I went ahead and pulled out my liquid glue, my Tombow Mono, and I'm just going and putting these down. And you can see how if I had left on the white, that would have been really kind of distracting from that green, that monotone palette, right? The only color thus far on my page that is not a neutral is that green, and even the whites on my page aren't white. Now, this top one should be farther over to the right. It doesn't quite line up perfectly. I decided I don't care. So here's my fractured page. So I have a minimalist page. I have a fractured page. And the third word was security. So I had this idea of a bird cage. So I went into my Cricut design studio. I found a bird cage. I did kind of create a door that opens and closes. It did not really originally come with that. I just kind of cut some of the lines there. But I am going to add this bird cage to my page as my image for the word security. I imagine that the only thing that is secure in a bird cage is a bird, and that's only if there's a cat on the prowl, I suppose. I would imagine that most birds don't think that the bird cage is security as much as it is prison, but also maybe they don't think about it that much. I could clearly be overthinking the whole idea, but I like the idea of a bird cage. First thing that came to mind when I thought of the word security, so I went with it. So I kind of am putting this down kind of in that L, I guess it would be a J, where I made my lines. I did end up putting up a little bit higher than I planned, but that's okay. It's okay. So, and then the fourth word was flight. I have these stickers that are printed on tissue paper, and there were a couple of birds in this ephemera pack that I have. I did mount them onto some white cardstock because I was afraid the tissue paper would make them blend too much into the background. I am going to go around them just a little bit with some archival ink because there's a little bit of white showing that I don't really care for. It is kind of hard to go around the toes and the feathers, so I kind of go at it from the back, and that works enough. This first bird, I'm going to perch on the very edge of the open bird cage, but I have to put his feet over to the left far enough that if that bird cage door opens, that the bird won't rip off the page, right? So it is a little bit of finessing and finagling there. I'm going to use my Tombow glue. Off camera, before I put my page away to finish drying, I did put a tiny sliver of foam tape underneath the very right edge of that birdcage door so that when I put this page in my art journal, the door doesn't get just stuck down. So there's the birdie on the edge of the open birdcage door. I did have to move it over a little bit. That's why I hadn't pushed it down too hard yet. And then I'm going to add this other birdie who is flying away. He's clearly flown the coop or the cage or whatever. He's left his, quote, security, and he's headed out into the wide open, minimalist, fractured world. I'm going around the edges of this birdie with some archival ink as well. Same thing. Don't like the white that's sticking out because I had to put some solid behind that tissue paper. I'm just going to add this bird to kind of the top leftish corner there, and ignore my bright orange nail polish. I kind of tried something new. Don't love it, but it'll last for a week, and I can live with that. I did pull out my gel pens. I have that black glaze pen from Jelly Roll and filled in their eyes. And then when the eyes were dry, I went back in with the white and put the whites of their eyes back in. I also, the bird that's flying has a lot of white polka dots on its feathers. So I took my gel pen and added those white highlights and polka dots, not polka dots, dots, polka dots. Birds don't have polka dots, Jenny. They just have dots. And then on the bird escaping the cage now, I added the white back into its feathers because it did kind of get muted down with the archival ink. And it's just a little bit of zhuzhing. I'm zhuzhing it. I'm going to go ahead and sign it in the bottom right-hand corner. I'm just going to sign my name, and I'm going to date it February because these 4 words were the February prompts for Mission Inspiration Facebook group, which I will link in the video down below. Go check it out. It is a great group. Mike does a lot of work to make sure that we have interesting and inspiring things to work with every week. I'm going to go ahead and glue my focal images or my inspiration images down to the back of my page. For a second there, I stuck it down to the wrong side. I was like, oh, wait, no, this can't go there. Because then when I punch holes in it, I'll punch holes in the back of that. You know, it's a thing. I'm going to go ahead and grab my hole punch. I will punch holes in my page so that when it's all dried, I can stick it into my binder and put it away. So this is how I am working the Mission Inspiration prompts this year. This is not how everybody's doing it. This is just how I felt like I could work Mission Inspiration into my schedule right now because I love working with Mike and his inspiration prompts, and my life's crazy right now. So thanks for hanging out with me. I hope you enjoyed the video. I have a couple of other videos here I think you would like as well. Leave me a comment down below. Tell me if you had a heart attack when I started cutting up that background. Give me a thumbs up if you liked the video, and have a really fabulous day.